I never imagined I'd be cast aside by my own daughter. I never dreamed the man she married would rob me of my dignity at my lowest point and that she would allow it. But what they didn't realize was that life had one final card for me to play. And when I played it, everything shifted. Prepare yourself, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. Comment below where you're watching from and remember to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. My name is Dorothy. I'm 58 years old, and until recently, I believed in something called unconditional love. Particularly when it came to family, I structured my life around my husband and our daughter, Rachel. Every meal I prepared, every holiday I organized, every dollar I saved was for them. When my husband died from cancer last year, it felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. But I told myself I still had Rachel. I still had my daughter. I sold the house my husband and I had built together in Willow Grove, just north of Phoenix. Too many memories, too many nights waking up hoping to hear his voice calling from the kitchen. Rachel and her husband Marcus invited me to stay with them for a while, or at least Rachel did. Marcus barely glanced up from his phone when I arrived. I tried not to cause problems. I stayed in my small room at the back. I cooked, cleaned, offered to handle errands, attempting to be useful, trying to stay invisible. But Marcus had a way of making me feel unwelcome. His eyes always held this irritation, like I was a thorn in his side. It began with small things. He'd roll his eyes when I asked a question. He'd switch the TV while I was mid-show. Once I heard him mutter under his breath, "Freeloader," as he walked past me in the hall. I tried to tell myself I misheard, but deep inside I knew I hadn't. Rachel, she remained silent. I'd look to her for support, for a word, anything. But she always minimized it. "He's stressed," she'd say. "Work's been tough." I swallowed the humiliation and stayed quiet. That's what mothers do, right? But that night, that one evening, it broke me. We were at the dinner table. I had prepared chicken pot pie, his favorite. Rachel was browsing on her phone, Marcus nursing a beer like he always did. The silence was thick. Then suddenly, Marcus looked up and said, "You know, maybe it's time we stop pretending this is temporary. We're not a charity." Rachel froze. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He smirked. "I mean, how long is this supposed to continue? You're not working. You're not contributing. We've got bills. We didn't sign up for additional mouths to feed." My breath caught. My heart was racing. I turned to Rachel, desperate. "Rachel," she wouldn't look at me. "Maybe it's best," she mumbled, "if you found something more stable for everyone's benefit. Everyone's benefit." I didn't yell. I didn't protest. I stood up, went to my room, packed my belongings, 2 suitcases. That's all that remained of my life. I didn't even cry while I packed. The tears came later when I stood outside their building, the wind cutting through my coat, and realized I had nowhere to go. Rachel didn't accompany me out. Marcus didn't even bother pretending. I sat on the curb for an hour. My phone battery was dead. My spirit was too. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to be erased. That night, I checked into a motel, the type where the wallpaper curls and the vending machine steals your change. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything could become so cold, wondering what I had done to deserve this kind of abandonment. The following morning, I sent Rachel a text. "I understand. I love you always." No response. The next week I sent another, then another. Birthdays, small updates, silence. 3 months passed. Each day felt longer than the previous one. I tried applying for work, anything. But nobody wanted to hire a grieving widow in her late 50s with no recent employment history. I considered cleaning houses, babysitting, but my body didn't cooperate like it used to. The isolation, it was suffocating. And worse than that, the humiliation. I had given everything to that girl. How could she abandon me so easily? One evening, as I was sorting through a box of old family mementos, trying to feel close to something, anything, I discovered it. My mother's old diary. I hadn't read it in years, perhaps never. But something drew me to it. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, turned the pages, and that's when I found it. A name, a truth, a secret that altered everything. I remember the moment vividly. My hands trembled. My heart raced because suddenly I wasn't just the mother who got thrown out. I was someone else entirely. And for the first time in months, I smiled. They took everything from me, but they had no clue what was coming. After that night, the days merged into each other like gray watercolors bleeding on wet paper. The motel room reeked of stale air and distant cigarettes. The buzzing drone of the vending machine outside my door became a lullaby of defeat. I remained quiet. I didn't cry every night, but when I did, it was silent. The type of crying where your entire body shakes, but you keep it inside because nobody's coming to comfort you. I messaged Rachel again on the fourth day. A simple text. I'm okay. Just wanted to know how you are. No response. I tried again 2 weeks later. Just a heart emoji. Nothing. I told myself she was busy, that she'd come around, that Marcus must be manipulating things. But as the weeks passed, that hope started to decay inside me. My funds were dwindling. I tried getting part-time employment, grocery stores, reception desks, even a diner down by the highway, but I was either overqualified or not suitable, which is just polite language for too old and too exhausted. One night, I sat on the floor of that room, going through the only box I had brought with me that wasn't clothing. It was a dusty memory box from the house. Some old photos, a few letters, and tucked at the very bottom, a small leather-bound book. My mother's diary. It surprised me. I don't recall packing it. I almost put it back, but something about the way the leather felt in my hands made me hesitate. I turned on the old lamp on the side table and opened the first page. Her handwriting hadn't changed from the notes she used to slip into my lunchbox as a child. Looped, neat, always in ink. Initially, it was ordinary material. Weather, church, complaints about grocery costs. But then I reached the entry dated June. He came again today, said he wished things were different, that he wished I could be his wife. But he has a family, a business, a reputation to protect. Dorothy will never know. She must never know. I just pray one day she comprehends how much I loved her, even if she was born out of mistake and desire. I read it twice, then again. She must never know. My breath caught in my throat. I flipped further. Entry after entry. Hints, memories, meetings at hotels, small cash payments she tried to decline but needed desperately. She never named him completely, only initials, RJW. But then another entry, February. He said he'd made arrangements that if anything ever happened to him, he'd ensure Dorothy had something, a portion of what he built. It won't be official, naturally, it's too risky, but he promised me a trust, a letter. He said his lawyer, Mr. Silverman, would know. That name. It struck me like a blow to the stomach. Silverman. I'd seen it before. It took me 2 days and several online searches from the motel's shared computer, but I located him. Nathan Silverman, retired estate attorney, still listed under a private firm in Tucson. I didn't call. I couldn't. My hands shook too much. Instead, I sent a letter, a real handwritten letter, explaining who I was, who my mother was, and requesting, pleading for a conversation. 2 weeks later, I received a call. I remember the way his voice faltered when I mentioned my mother's name. He knew her, not just professionally, personally. I always wondered if you'd contact me someday, he said. There's something you need to see. I took a Greyhound to Tucson the next morning. My suitcase was half packed just in case he turned out to be some con artist. But when I walked into that quiet office filled with old books and even older silence, I knew it was genuine. He handed me a sealed envelope, yellowed, delicate. It was from Robert James Westbrook, the founder of Westbrook Petroleum, one of the largest oil firms in the Southwest. A man I'd seen in newspaper clippings all my life. A man with a family, a reputation, a legacy. The letter was addressed to my daughter, Dorothy Louise. I couldn't read the entire thing in one go. I wept before the second paragraph. He admitted everything. The affair, the regret, the silent love, and then the promise. In the event of my death, I have insured a portion of my personal assets, untraceable through my estate, are to be delivered to you via Mr. Silverman. You are my blood, and though I was too much a coward to claim you in life, I claim you now in death. Mr. Silverman slid a folder across the table. Inside, bank accounts, a modest investment portfolio, ownership documents, titles, the total value just over $1 million. I stared at the papers, then at him. This is real, I whispered. He nodded. It's yours. Always has been. My heart thundered. Not because of the money, but because for the first time in my life, I felt chosen, acknowledged. I didn't scream or laugh or collapse. I just sat there, quiet as a breath, letting the truth flow over me like a long-awaited rain. That night in my motel room, I didn't sleep. I gazed at the ceiling like I had for months, but this time with a smile forming on my face. They thought they discarded me. They thought I was finished. But they had no idea. I wasn't broken. I was just beginning. I didn't return to Phoenix right away. Something inside me had changed permanently. I wasn't just Dorothy, the forgotten mother. I was someone different now. Someone who had been deceived her entire life and finally saw the truth. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I wasn't drowning in shame. I was breathing in clarity. I remained in Tucson for a few more days, just walking through neighborhoods, sipping coffee in silence, observing people live their lives, people who hadn't been cast aside like I had. And for the first time, I didn't envy them. I studied them. I wondered who among them wore smiles that concealed heartache, who had been betrayed, who had clawed their way back from being invisible. Nathan Silverman didn't just provide me the inheritance. He gave me time. Time to process, time to understand what I now possessed in my hands. It wasn't just wealth, it was power, and I had no idea what to do with it. But grief has a way of transforming into fuel when you've been humiliated enough. When I returned to Phoenix, I didn't go back to the motel. I reserved a short-term rental downtown, just off Central Avenue. Clean, modern, peaceful, the kind of place Rachel and Marcus would never picture me affording. I began dressing differently, more refined, more intentional. Not flashy, just invisible in a different way. The kind of invisible that gets you through doors. I started watching YouTube videos on investing, real estate, contracts. I absorbed the language of business, not because I wanted to build an empire, but because I wanted to protect myself. I would never be helpless again. That's when I discovered it. The listing was hidden on a real estate auction site, a unit apartment building in South Phoenix. Somewhat run down, but structurally solid. The location, the exact complex where Rachel and Marcus resided. I sat there staring at the screen, heart pounding. It was listed as distressed with the owner defaulting on property taxes. Auction scheduled in 2 weeks. I didn't hesitate. With Mr. Silverman's assistance, I created an LLC, an anonymous shell company. I filed the documentation, transferred the funds, and submitted the bid. I wasn't planning vengeance. Not precisely, but I was going to take control of the one place they thought they controlled. The auction came and went. I won quietly, legally, completely under the radar. And just like that, I owned the building where they lived, where they expelled me with 2 suitcases and a hollow excuse, where they humiliated me at my lowest point. I remember sitting at my desk, looking at the deed, and whispering aloud, "Let's see how Marcus appreciates paying rent to a mouth he couldn't feed." A month later, the notification letters went out to all tenants. Rents would be reassessed, lease terms examined. And for Marcus and Rachel, the new amount was triple, not double, triple. Market value plus overdue fees. He must have erupted. I didn't need to witness it to know. I could sense the fury from miles away. But it wasn't about money. It was about dignity. Marcus was a man who needed to feel in control, and I had just pulled the foundation out from under him silently. Rachel attempted to call me 2 days after the notice. It was the first time she reached out since the night I departed. I let it go to voicemail. "Mom, I don't know if you heard, but something strange is happening. Our rent just increased significantly. Marcus is losing it. I don't know. Can we talk?" I didn't reply. This wasn't about revenge. This was about consequences. They needed to experience the weight of their choices. I drove by the building once late at night. Their lights were on. I could see shadows shifting behind the curtains. Rachel pacing, Marcus shouting, his silhouette unmistakable. I observed them for a minute, then drove away. Part of me felt empty, part of me felt justified, and part of me still ached terribly. Because even now, knowing what I knew, possessing what I possessed, I would have given anything to be welcomed back in, not to the apartment, but to my daughter's heart. But I knew that wasn't possible, at least not yet. So I remained silent, and I waited because sometimes the loudest justice is the one that doesn't speak a word. And I wasn't done yet. I didn't realize how much I had transformed until I saw Rachel at the grocery store 3 weeks after the rent adjustment. She didn't notice me. I was 2 aisles over, concealed behind a rack of discounted cereal. She looked exhausted. Not just tired, worn out. Her hair was tied back carelessly, the way she used to do when she'd been crying. Her cart was half empty, mostly cheap basics. Rice, eggs, a few generic cans. I should have walked away. I didn't. I followed her through the store at a distance, heart racing like I was doing something improper. She paused in front of a small box of mac and cheese, then glanced down at her phone. A text from Marcus, perhaps. Her shoulders dropped. She returned the box. That moment shattered me. Not because I pitied her, but because I remembered the little girl who used to run to me sobbing when she scraped her knee. The one who asked me every night to check for monsters under her bed. And now she was living with one. I drove home that day and sat on the couch in silence for hours. I gazed at the window, thinking about how life had twisted us into strangers. But I reminded myself this wasn't punishment. This was consequence, and consequence was long overdue. I had plans now. Not just the building, but a quiet, deliberate chess match. Every move calculated, every step considered. With the LLC fully established and the property legally transferred, I initiated repairs. Small ones initially, leaks, broken locks, flickering lights. Marcus never noticed. He was too preoccupied by the rent increase, shouting at the property manager through email, demanding explanations. But I understood him, knew how his ego functioned. He wasn't going to relocate. He'd see that as defeat. And Rachel, she'd follow his lead as she always did. So, I continued. I updated the property signage, had a security camera installed near the lobby, upgraded the tenants' mailboxes, all under the name of my company, DL Properties, short for Dorothy Louise. Nobody knew who was behind it. Then came the announcement. Annual inspections, mandatory. Marcus sent an angry response through the tenant portal filled with hollow threats and self-righteous fury. I smiled reading it. He was unraveling, and I didn't need to do anything. Meanwhile, I was becoming someone I barely recognized. I styled my hair differently now. Sharper attire. I walked with intention. I started attending small business gatherings under a pseudonym, learning the mechanics of real estate, forming connections. No one inquired about my past. They only saw a quiet, composed woman with keen eyes and available funds. The best disguise is the truth you don't reveal. One morning, I passed Rachel and Marcus in the parking lot as I departed a tenant meeting. I kept my sunglasses on, hair tucked into an elegant bun, documents in hand. Rachel barely looked at me. Marcus didn't recognize me at all. Later that night, I sat in my living room sipping tea, contemplating how strange it felt to walk directly past your own child and be invisible. Not because you're weak, but because you're stronger than they recall. They couldn't see me now, because they only knew the version of me they used to control. And that woman was gone. The calls from Rachel persisted. Soft, tentative voicemails. "Hi, Mom. Just wanted to see if maybe you had time to talk. I know things have been complicated." I didn't return them, not out of cruelty, but because I needed her to feel the emptiness she created. And every time I felt doubt creep in, I opened my mother's diary. I read those words repeatedly. Dorothy will never know. She must never know. But I did know now, and with that knowledge came a type of armor no one could penetrate. I was no longer the woman pleading to remain under their roof. I was the woman who owned it. I always believed revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about balance, justice without flames, a correction, not a battle. But when I saw the email response from Marcus after he received the notice of his rent adjustment, I'll admit a small spark of satisfaction ignited inside me. Subject: rent increase. This is absolutely unacceptable. This must be an error. Tripling our rent? That's extortion. I demand to speak to whoever owns this dump. We've lived here for 3 years and never been late once. This is theft. He signed it, Marcus D. Harrison, like his name carried weight. I read the email 3 times and then forwarded it to my property manager with a simple instruction. Please respond using Standard Clause C regarding market rate adjustments. No special exceptions. Marcus wasn't just angry, he was shocked. His arrogance never allowed room for the possibility that someone could outmaneuver him. He'd become so accustomed to being in control that the concept of answering to a faceless landlord drove him crazy. Rachel tried calling me again that same night. The voicemail was different, no pretense. "Mom, I know you're not answering, but I really need to speak with you. Things are difficult right now. Marcus is upset. He's taking it out on everything. We're trying to figure things out. I miss you. I do." Her voice cracked at the end. For a moment, my fingers hovered over the screen. I could call her back, tell her it would be all right, that I'd fix everything, but I didn't, because it wasn't all right, and I couldn't keep repairing the messes she helped create. Rachel had let him throw me out like I was nothing more than an expense they couldn't manage. And now that the pressure was on her, she remembered how to dial my number. No, let her sit with the silence a bit longer. The following week, I authorized additional upgrades on the property. New exterior paint, hallway lighting, landscaping enhancements. Marcus's rent wasn't just a punishment. It was funding improvements for the other residents. That was the irony. Everyone else benefited. He just couldn't see it. He began leaving angry notes under the office door. "The water pressure is terrible. Trash is accumulating. If this is what we're paying for, it's a joke." Every note went unanswered. Rachel stopped leaving messages. She started texting instead. Brief ones. "Hey, can we talk? I really need you." Then silence again. Meanwhile, I monitored the bank statements roll in. DL Properties was stable, profitable even. The other tenants were quiet, respectful, and paid promptly. It was only Marcus creating noise, and Rachel caught in the storm. But things shifted when I received the quarterly report from the building manager. Attached were photos of Marcus and Rachel's unit. The bathroom had mold, kitchen tiles fractured, mail piling up on the floor. They were cutting corners, living frugally. I should have felt sympathy. Instead, I felt clarity. This wasn't just about rent. It was about control, and Marcus was losing it rapidly. Word around the building was he'd started working extra hours. Rachel was spotted crying on the back steps one afternoon by another resident. They were unraveling from within, and I didn't have to say a single word. That was the element I kept returning to. For so long, I was the one pleading to be heard, begging Rachel to recognize what Marcus was, to see what she was becoming by standing with him. Now they were suffocating on their own silence, and I was observing from above, literally. My new apartment overlooked their courtyard, different building, higher floor, better neighborhood, a view they could never afford. I didn't watch them constantly, just enough to remember that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the betrayal, that what they did to me warranted consequences. And yet, despite all that, some nights I still found myself sitting by the window, holding my phone, staring at Rachel's last text. "I really need you." The woman inside me, the mother, ached. But the woman I had become, she understood this was only the beginning. I always thought heartbreak arrived in loud moments, slamming doors, screamed words, public displays. But the real heartbreak, it's quiet. It comes in the form of a voicemail you don't return, a message left unread, the silence between you and someone who once called you mommy. The calls from Rachel ceased. The texts diminished, but the damage on her end only seemed to intensify. From what I gathered through the building staff, the tension in their apartment had turned into open conflict. Marcus was snapping at everyone, refusing maintenance requests and demanding unnecessary inspections, searching for someone to blame. Rachel, I was told, appeared like she hadn't slept in days. I didn't celebrate. I didn't rejoice. This wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about something far more painful, watching the daughter I raised willingly remain in a cage and call it love. One afternoon, my property manager sent over a report after a noise complaint. The neighbor downstairs had heard a heated dispute, yelling something about losing control and, "This is all your fault." Marcus had stormed out and didn't return until the next morning. Rachel stayed locked inside the apartment the entire night. Lights off, curtains drawn. I waited. Not for Marcus, for her. It took 2 more days, 2 long, painful days. Then, just as the sun was setting behind the trees one evening, my building's intercom buzzed. "Hi, this is Rachel Harrison. I was wondering if my mom lives here." My heart stopped. I didn't answer immediately. I just watched the screen, frozen. Then slowly, I pressed the door release. 10 minutes later, A soft knock echoed at my apartment door. When I opened it, she stood there appearing like a shadow of the girl I raised. Pale, makeup smeared, creases in her shirt. She looked 20 years older than she was. We stared at each other for a long moment. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she released a breath. "Hi, Mom." I stepped aside. She entered slowly, like she wasn't certain she was permitted to. The room was silent except for the clink of teacups as I prepared 2 mugs. I didn't ask why she was there. I didn't ask how she was. I just handed her the tea, sat down across from her, and waited. "I don't know where to begin," she said, her voice barely audible. I said nothing. She looked down. "Marcus is not. He's not easy. He's angry constantly. Blames the rent, blames me, blames the dog next door for God's sake." Still, I stayed silent. I thought I was doing the right thing. Back then, when we asked you to leave. Asked, as if I had a choice. I just wanted to maintain the peace. "I didn't want more conflict," Marcus said. She paused. "He said you'd never leave unless we forced you. And God, I despise myself for agreeing." I took a sip of tea. "I miss you," she whispered, "but I don't know how to repair this." I studied her face, every line, every flinch. She was seeking forgiveness, but afraid to request it. So, I gave her the only thing I could: silence. Because sometimes silence is safer than the truth. We sat like that for nearly an hour. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for assistance. She just wanted to be near me, and I allowed her. When she finally stood to depart, she reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything." I didn't say it back. I just held her hand a bit longer than she anticipated. She pulled away first, and then, with tears forming in her eyes, she walked out the door. I didn't cry. But the moment the door clicked shut, I sank into my chair, holding the warmth of her teacup in my palms like a lifeline. She had come. She had looked me in the eye. And now I knew the fractures were finally beginning to show. The thing about power, true power, is that you never have to raise your voice to wield it. You don't slam doors or shout warnings. You just pull a string here, close a door there, and observe the ones who underestimated you begin to squirm. And Marcus, he was squirming. After Rachel's visit, things grew darker in that apartment. I didn't need a camera to know it. You can sense a house unraveling if you listen carefully enough. The maintenance team informed me Marcus had become unhinged, storming down to the management office twice weekly, demanding to know who owned the building. He wanted names. He wanted a face. He wanted someone to blame. The fact that he didn't have one, that made him spiral. He started investigating. I knew he would. Marcus wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. I'd witnessed the way he used to check Rachel's phone when she took too long at the store. The way he examined her receipts, commented on how long she took to run errands. Possessive didn't even begin to describe it. So, when he started probing around for the name behind DL Properties, I was prepared. He started by trying to research the LLC standard, but my lawyer had filed everything through a privacy trust. No names, no trails. Then came the phishing emails to my property manager, pretending to be a tenant, asking who owns the building. Sloppy, desperate. He even contacted the title office, pretending to be a lawyer representing another property. The clerk flagged it and reported it directly to us. And when those avenues failed, he turned inward. Rachel. I don't know what occurred exactly, but one of the neighbors contacted the management office and asked if someone could check on the Harrisons. She said she heard glass shattering, raised voices, the type of anger that doesn't just come from bills, it comes from fear. The maintenance man went up there. Nobody answered, but through the door he could hear Marcus pacing, muttering, Rachel crying. The silence afterward was heavier than the shouting. A few days later, I received an unusual envelope. No name on the outside, no return address. Inside, a note. I know what you're doing. You think you're clever, but you don't frighten me. I'll discover who you are, and when I do, you'll regret it. No signature, but I recognized the handwriting. Marcus wrote like he talked, angry, uneven, pressing too forcefully on the paper. I sat there with the letter in my hands, heart pounding, not out of fear, out of memory, because it transported me back to the moment he stood in that kitchen and looked me in the eye like I was dirt beneath his feet. The way Rachel stood beside him, not just silent, but complicit. And now he was the one grasping at shadows, choking on uncertainty, screaming into emptiness. It was poetic, but it was also dangerous. So I intensified my efforts. I had my lawyer contact building security. We installed additional surveillance, discreet, legal, routine. I ensured the other tenants were protected. The building wasn't going to collapse because one man couldn't handle the weight of his own cruelty. And Rachel, she didn't call again, but I heard from the building manager that she'd been walking to work. Her car had been sold. Their utilities were being reduced. Lights off by 9 p.m. No heat some nights. The cracks weren't just in their relationship. They were in their survival. And yet, through it all, I maintained my distance. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about resolution. Letting Marcus's world shrink until he realized how insignificant he really was, and letting Rachel decide, would she remain in the cage or find the key I'd placed directly in front of her. I knew she wasn't ready yet, but the walls were closing in, and secrets have a way of seeping through cracks. I didn't expect the knock on my door that night. It had been quiet for days. No emails from management, no voicemails from Rachel, no more anonymous threats. Just silence, the type that feels like a storm crouched in the distance, waiting. But when the knock came, soft and slow, something in my chest constricted. I opened the door. Rachel stood there, drenched from the rain, a grocery bag held to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her standing. Her eyes were red and her mouth opened, but nothing emerged. She looked like she had exhausted her words days ago. I stepped aside. She entered slowly, dripping water on the hardwood floor. I handed her a towel, and we moved without speaking. I warmed the kettle, poured 2 mugs of chamomile tea. She sat on the edge of the couch like she didn't intend to stay long, like she didn't deserve to. And perhaps she didn't. She gazed into her cup, eyes hollow. "He's not who I thought he was," she said finally. I stayed quiet. I knew. Part of me always knew. But I told myself it was stress, that he just needed support, that if I was patient, he'd improve. Still, I said nothing. She looked up, her voice shaking. "He believes someone's targeting us. He's obsessed. He's been going through my phone, my emails. Last week he followed me to work, said he was ensuring I wasn't involved." A tremor ran through her and not from the cold. "He asked if I was concealing something. If you were concealing something." That caught my breath. She didn't wait for an answer. "I told him I hadn't spoken to you in weeks, that I didn't even know where you were." She paused. "But that was untrue." I met her eyes for the first time. "I discovered your building listed in a security notice. Same management company. I figured it out. It wasn't difficult. Of course it wasn't." Rachel was intelligent, always had been. But intelligent doesn't always mean courageous. And now she looked like someone who had finally opened her eyes and despised what she saw. I didn't speak. Not yet. "I miss you," she whispered, "but I don't even know how to be around you anymore." My hand tightened around the mug. "You left," she said, voice breaking, "and I let you. I let him push you out." Finally, I spoke. "No, Rachel. You didn't let him. You stood with him." That stopped her cold. She blinked. Her lips parted slightly like she wanted to deny it, to defend herself, but there was nothing left to defend. I stood up, walked to the window, gazed out into the night. "I pleaded for your voice that night," I said. "Just one word. Just one." And you remained silent. Behind me, I heard her exhale. A quiet, broken sound. "I didn't think it would get this severe," she said. "I thought I could handle him." "You can't handle a man like that," I said softly. "You survive him or you leave him." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. We sat in silence for a long time. 2 women who shared blood, but not trust. Not yet. Maybe never. When she finally stood to depart, she set the mug down carefully, her eyes rimmed with unshed tears. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I just needed to remember what it felt like to be secure." I walked her to the door. She hesitated, then turned back suddenly and wrapped her arms around me. I didn't return the embrace at first. Then I did, but gently, cautiously, like someone trying to hold a memory without letting it slip through their fingers. When she pulled back, she didn't say goodbye. She just looked at me one final time and left. And as the door closed behind her, I felt something shift deep in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the faintest glimmer of something that might one day grow into it if she allowed it. The invitation went out on a Tuesday morning, quietly, professionally, without fanfare. Tenant meeting to discuss upcoming building renovations, scheduled in the common room the following week. Mandatory attendance, questions welcome. I knew Marcus would be there. I knew he wouldn't be able to resist. He wanted a name, a face, someone to point a finger at. He had no idea he'd be walking directly into the hands of the woman he discarded like a broken appliance. The day of the meeting, I arrived early. I wore a charcoal gray blazer and dark jeans, simple, elegant, unrecognizable. My hair, now in soft waves, brushed my shoulders. I looked nothing like the woman who once pleaded for a sliver of dignity at Rachel's kitchen table. The common room filled gradually. Tenants trickled in, some curious, others annoyed, most indifferent. And then came Marcus. He stormed in with the swagger of a man anticipating confrontation. Rachel trailing behind him like a shadow. He didn't look around, didn't notice me. He only saw the property manager at the front and went directly to him. "Where is she?" he demanded. "I want to speak to the person in charge today." The manager remained composed. "All questions will be addressed during the presentation." Marcus scoffed. Rachel looked down at her shoes. I sat near the back, silent. The presentation commenced. Routine announcements, upgrades, timelines, the new security system, the updated landscaping, the improved insulation, practical changes, smart decisions, all funded in part by the very rent Marcus had so bitterly contested. Then the manager paused. "We'd like to thank DL Properties for their commitment to revitalizing the property and prioritizing tenant comfort. The owner is here today. Should anyone have questions?" I stood up. The room turned. I walked slowly toward the front, calm, measured. Every step, a quiet drumbeat in my chest. Marcus's face twisted in confusion, then disbelief. Rachel's mouth fell open in shock. I turned to the room. "Good evening," I said. "My name is Dorothy. I'm the owner of this building." You could hear a pin drop. Marcus stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "You? This is a joke. What kind of game is this?" I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the fractures he had tried to conceal. The perspiration behind his collar, the puffiness under his eyes, the panic. "No game," I said softly. "Just business." He took a step forward. "You manipulated this. You've been behind this the entire time. You raised our rent. You're trying to destroy us." I held my ground. "I provided you a roof. I made improvements. I treated every tenant equally. What I didn't do was forget." He opened his mouth to speak, but I turned back to the group. "If anyone has questions about the changes or improvements, I'm happy to answer them after the meeting. Thank you." I stepped aside. The meeting resumed, but the tension never dissipated. Marcus didn't sit down. He just stood there, trembling, furious. Rachel sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes wide and wet. When the meeting concluded, tenants approached me, shaking hands, asking questions, expressing gratitude. Some had suspected. Most had no idea. Marcus waited until the room emptied. Then he marched toward me. "You think you've won?" he hissed. "But this is nothing. You've made an enemy." I stared at him, eyes level. "No, Marcus. I didn't make anything. You did. The day you looked me in the eye and treated me like I didn't matter." Rachel stepped between us. "Marcus, stop." He turned to her, shocked. "What did you just—" "I said stop," she repeated louder this time. "She's not your enemy. She never was. You are." He looked at her like she'd struck him, and in a way she had. Rachel turned to me, her voice trembling. "I didn't know, I swear, about the building, the money, any of it." I nodded. "I know. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you had to see it, not just hear it." She blinked back tears. Marcus scoffed, stepping back. "You two deserve each other." "No," I said quietly. "She deserves better." Then I turned and walked away. And for the first time since that terrible night in their kitchen, I felt something shift inside me. Not revenge, not satisfaction, but power. Quiet, firm, and entirely mine. Rachel appeared at my door again 4 days later. this time carrying something in her hands that made my knees weaken the moment I saw it. A book. Faded leather, corner damaged, the spine barely holding. My mother's diary. I opened the door without a word. She stepped in, eyes wide, her breath unsteady. "I found it in my closet," she said. "The last time I visited you, you must have left it behind." She placed it on the coffee table like it was sacred, and for me, it was. I read it. My heart stopped. "I wasn't trying to intrude," she rushed, "but I recognized her handwriting. I was searching for something that made sense." Silence fell between us like a curtain, heavy, still. "I didn't know about Robert Westbrook," she whispered, "or the money or the trust or any of it." I nodded once, slowly. "I didn't know either. Not until I had nothing else to lose." Her voice broke. "Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe you were helpless?" I looked her in the eye, and for once, she didn't look away. "Because I was helpless. The night you closed the door on me, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have money. I didn't even have a place to cry where someone wouldn't knock and tell me to keep it down." Rachel winced. "I found the diary at my lowest point. When I was counting coins to eat dinner, when I hadn't spoken to anyone in a week. That diary, it didn't just tell me who I was. It reminded me that I mattered, that my mother didn't just love me. She fought for me, silently, without ever being able to show it." Rachel sat down, hands clenched in her lap. "I don't know how I became the kind of daughter who could do what I did. I keep asking myself that repeatedly." I walked to the window, stared out at the street below, the quiet hum of life passing by. "You didn't become her all at once," I said. "It was small choices, letting things slide, choosing peace over truth, believing love meant loyalty, even when it hurt." She stood and walked toward me. "I've left him." The words hit the air like thunder. He tried to go through my belongings again, my laptop, my bag. I told him no. That was it. He screamed, packed a bag, and left. Said he'd be back. I changed the locks the next day. I turned to her, stunned. "I don't know who I am without him," she admitted, voice shaking. "But I'd rather discover that than keep disappearing." A silence passed between us, thick with everything we hadn't said. Then she looked down at the diary. "You didn't deserve what I did. What we did. I can't repair that, but I want to try." I walked back to her slowly, sat down beside her. "I used to dream about hearing those words," I said. "But when you say them now, they don't fix the past. They rewrite it." She looked at me, confused. I held her hand gently. "You see me now. That changes everything." We sat there together for a long time, the kind of silence that doesn't hurt, but heals, the kind that comes after truth has finally had its say. Before Rachel left that night, she paused at the door. "You didn't raise me to be weak," she said. "I just forgot how strong you were." I smiled softly. "No," I said. "You didn't forget. You just stopped looking." And now she was seeing everything, not just who I had become, but who I'd always been. When the email arrived from Marcus, I almost didn't open it. The subject line alone made my stomach turn. "We need to talk. Now." I read it slowly, carefully, his words sharp, frantic, and dripping with desperation. "I know everything about the building, about the inheritance, about your little secret with Westbrook. You think you're clever? You think you can destroy my life and walk away smiling? Let me make something clear. If you don't reverse this, I will go to the press. Your name, your mother's affair, everything. Let's see how your precious reputation holds up when everyone knows what kind of family you really come from." I stared at the screen in stunned silence. He had finally connected the pieces. Somehow, through Rachel or his own investigation, he'd uncovered the truth. But I wasn't afraid, because I had prepared for this moment since the day I purchased the building. I forwarded the email to my attorney. By the next morning, Marcus received a cease and desist letter. In it were records of every threatening message he had sent to the property office, the falsified documents he tried to submit under a fake law firm, and the tampered emails we had quietly traced back to his IP address. There were tenant complaints, maintenance sabotage logs, and even audio clips of his rants from public spaces around the building. We didn't need to press criminal charges. Just one defamation and harassment suit was sufficient. He panicked, and I knew it because Rachel called me 2 days later. "He's gone," she said, her voice shaking. "Packed up while I was at work. Left a note saying he was being persecuted. Said you ruined his life." "He ruined his own," I said quietly. Rachel was silent. Then, "I'm sorry." Again, forever thinking he deserved my silence. "You were frightened," I replied. "I've been there. Fear makes you small, but you don't have to remain that way." It wasn't long before Marcus attempted to retaliate, posting vague rants on social media, implying corruption, betrayal. He never named names. He couldn't afford to. Not after the second letter from my attorney threatened legal action for every word he published. He went quiet after that, publicly at least. Privately, I knew he'd never forget the day he realized the woman he expelled with 2 suitcases and a tired face now owned the roof over his head, the lease under his name, and the keys to every locked door he once slammed in mine. Rachel, on the other hand, was transforming. She moved out of the unit within a month, found a small studio near her job, started therapy, joined a community art class. She even painted something for me, an abstract of a phoenix in dark reds and golds. I hung it above my fireplace. We talked more frequently now, not every day, but when we did, it was genuine, honest, no more pretending. The last piece of the puzzle arrived in an envelope. Another letter. This one from Mr. Silverman. "Congratulations, Dorothy. The building has officially been transferred. The final tenants have signed new agreements. The lawsuit against Mr. Harrison has been resolved in your favor. You are now free to sell, hold, or restructure as you see fit." I folded the letter carefully, held it to my chest. This wasn't just about money or property or revenge. This was about truth, about reclaiming my name, my story, my strength. The next morning, I called a realtor. I was ready to close the final chapter and open the door to a life I no longer had to survive. I could finally live it on my terms. I sold the building in late spring. The final paperwork was signed on a bright, cloudless Tuesday. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a quiet click of a pen, a firm handshake, and the weight of 3 years of grief, betrayal, and silence finally lifting off my shoulders. The money was wired to my account the next day, but I didn't celebrate. Instead, I wrote a check, a large one. Half of the proceeds went to a local shelter for women and children in crisis. The kind of place I wish I had known existed the night I stood on that curb with 2 suitcases and no one to call. I asked them to build a wing named after my mother, the Grace House. It was my way of honoring the woman who gave me strength in silence, who concealed a lifetime of secrets so that I could one day discover the truth and become something more than what the world expected. The other half, I used it to purchase a small house. It wasn't extravagant, just a charming little 2-bedroom on the same street where I grew up in Willow Grove. Oak trees out front, a porch swing, sufficient space for quiet, for healing, for growing tomatoes if I ever felt inclined. The day I moved in, Rachel helped carry boxes. She didn't say much, neither did I. But after we finished unpacking, she sat beside me on the porch swing, legs tucked under her, eyes scanning the street like she was attempting to recognize the girl she used to be. "I remember riding my bike here," she said softly, "before everything got complicated." I nodded. "You were always safe here." "I forgot how that felt," she whispered. We didn't discuss Marcus. We didn't need to. His chapter had closed without a dramatic ending. Just silence. He vanished into a new city, a new job, probably a new deception. But not before signing a non-disclosure agreement and quietly dropping his threats. The last thing he wanted was another legal battle, or worse, for the world to see the truth about him. He was a ghost now. Rachel stayed for dinner. We made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup like we used to when she was little. She laughed when she burned one side. I laughed when she tried to blame the pan. It was the first genuine laughter we had shared in years. That night, after she departed, I stood at the window holding a cup of tea in both hands, watching the moonlight stretch across the front lawn. And for the first time in a long, long time, I said the words out loud. "I forgive you," not to Rachel, to myself. Because that was the hardest part, not rising from the ashes, but learning that I was never the fire they tried to extinguish. I was the spark they underestimated. They taught me that silence was weakness. But I learned how to weaponize it. They tried to erase me, and I became someone they could never forget. I sat down on the couch, opened the diary one last time, and tucked a note inside for Rachel to find someday. You don't need their love to be worthy. You don't need their approval to be strong. You only need the truth. And to never, ever forget who you are. The clock ticked softly in the background. My tea grew cold in my hands, but my heart, it was finally warm. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to win. I just needed to be who I was all along. And now, finally, I was home. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.